The day Adaku gave birth to her son Jel was the day her world changed. After 10 painful years of barrenness, years filled with prayers, tears, whispers behind her back, and the mocking sneers of her mother-in-law, Mama Chica, her miracle finally arrived. Joy flooded her heart like a long-awaited rain on parched land. That tiny baby boy was not just her child, he was her victory, her proof that God hadn't forgotten her, her answer to every insult she had ever endured. In the village, people had called her the Cursed One, saying her womb was as dry as the Harmattan wind. Mama Chica had made it worse, never sparing her tongue. She would say, "A woman who cannot give a man a child is just a housemaid with benefits." Those words stung like fire, and Adaku carried them in her chest for years, until now, Jel was everything to her. The minute she held him in her arms, she vowed silently, "I will give you the world, my son. No one will hurt you, no one will correct you. You are mine and mine alone." When she returned home from the hospital, she summoned all the house staff and stood at the center of the living room like a queen returning from battle. "This child you see is not just a baby," she declared with a straight face. "He is my miracle, my legacy. If any of you so much as raise your voice at him or touch him wrongly, you will leave this house without a word. Do you hear me?" The staff nodded nervously. Some exchanged glances, but none dared to argue. True to her word, Adaku became fiercely protective. Any domestic worker who even misplaced Jel's towel was instantly fired. She created a fortress of comfort around him. He never cried for long. If he did, she'd rush to his side, whispering apologies into his ears, promising to never let him suffer even the smallest discomfort. Jel grew up inside that cocoon of unfiltered love. He became attached to his mother like shadow to body. He refused to play with the other children in the compound. Instead, he trailed after Adaku all day long, clutching at the end of her wrapper, demanding to be carried, to be noticed, to be fed by her hands. If she sat beside her husband, Chi, and laughed even once, Jel would scream in rage, throw his toys, and stomp until Adaku returned to him. Chi, a hard-working man who spent most of his days at the shop, often returned home to a house that didn't feel like his. He would watch the strange closeness between mother and son, and it unsettled him. He tried to talk to Adaku one evening. "Adaku, this boy is too attached. He won't grow if you don't allow him to explore, to be around others. You are not helping him." Adaku rolled her eyes. "He's only a child, don't be jealous, he just loves me, that's all." Chi sighed. "A chick that stays too long under its mother's wings forgets how to fly." But she ignored him. To her, Jel was perfect. Jel was the child of her tears, and she was determined to give him everything, even if it meant losing sight of boundaries. As Bowa. Time passed, the bond deepened. Jel began to demand more of his mother's time and body. If the maid came to bathe him, he would scream, "No, Mommy, I don't want her. She pinches me." Adaku never investigated. Without asking a single question, she fired the maid the same day. "How dare you touch my son that way?" she shouted. She began bathing him herself every day, and every day he insisted she join him. Slowly, the lines that separated maternal affection and misplaced intimacy began to blur. Adaku thought nothing of it. She saw him as a child. To her, he was pure and innocent. So when he started asking questions about her body, she laughed them off. He's just smart, curious. Even when Jel's fingers lingered where they shouldn't, she convinced herself it was harmless. The world around her began to notice. Her own mother, Mama Adaisi, visited and saw something that made her skin crawl. "Adaku," she said one morning, while watching Jel cling to his mother in the living room, "why is this boy sleeping in your bed? Why does he shower with you at this age? This is not good, this is dangerous." Adaku smiled. "Mama, please, he's still a child. He doesn't even understand these things. You worry too much." Chi, hearing this from the next room, couldn't hold his tongue. "Mama, tell her. I've spoken to her until my throat is dry. She doesn't listen." By the time Jel turned 15, the boy Adaku once held in her arms like treasure had become something else entirely. He had grown tall, muscular and intense. He no longer followed her with childish awe, but with the eyes of a man. His behavior at school changed too. He challenged male teachers, refused to obey rules, and glared at anyone who came close to his mother. When the school counselor called home to report that Jel had physically pushed a male staff member, Adaku simply laughed. "My son is strong. He knows how to defend himself." But something deeper was taking root. Something dark. Something she could no longer explain away. Jel's obsession with his mother grew louder, more visible, more unsettling. He no longer waited for her to come to him. He claimed her presence as a right. If she went to the market, he went with her. If she sat with guests, Jel stood close by, arms folded, eyes scanning every movement like a bodyguard drunk on control. He was no longer the cute boy people admired. He was possessive, intense, and far too territorial. Chi had reached his limit. One afternoon, while sitting with Adaku on the veranda, he spoke with a heavy heart. "This isn't normal, Adaku. Jel is no longer a little child. He's a young man now. Look at how he looks at you. It's not right." Adaku frowned. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying you have turned him into something he should never have become. You fed him with too much closeness. You gave him no space to grow. And now he sees you as something more than his mother." Adaku stood up abruptly. "That's nonsense. You're just trying to find fault in my love for my son. Maybe you're the one with the dirty thoughts, Chi." He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "Love without boundaries becomes poison, Adaku. You are poisoning him." But his words didn't land. If anything, she hugged Jel tighter that night. And when Jel brought her flowers the next morning and called her my queen, she smiled, kissed his forehead, and told him, "You're the only man who truly understands me." Jel's behavior began to spill into the neighborhood. One afternoon, Mr. Oko, their elderly neighbor, joked playfully while Adaku watered her flowers. "Ah, Madam Adaku, you are still as beautiful as the day you got married, oh." Before anyone could laugh or reply, Jel stormed from the gate, eyes blazing. He grabbed Mr. Oko by the collar and slammed him into the garden wall. "Don't talk to her like that again. She's not yours to compliment." People rushed to separate them, and Chi came running from inside the house. He yanked Jel back, his voice rising. "What is wrong with you? That man is old enough to be your grandfather." But Jel didn't speak. He simply stood there, breathing, heavily, glaring at anyone who dared to come near his mother. That night, the house felt colder than usual. Adaku sat silently in the living room, her hands trembling slightly as she folded laundry. She didn't want to admit it, but a seed of fear had finally planted itself inside her. Jel's eyes weren't those of a son anymore. They burned with possession. It reminded her of the look Chi used to give her in their early courtship, hungry, proud, claiming. Later that night, Chi sat her down. "Adaku, please. Let's talk before this gets worse. We have to do something. Therapy, church, something. He's not behaving like a boy anymore. He's acting like a jealous husband." Adaku wanted to scream, to defend Jel again like she always did. But this time her voice failed her. Something inside her had shifted. She remembered the way Jel had grabbed her hand that morning and kissed it slowly, whispering, "Don't let anyone take you from me." The next day, while cleaning his room, she found something, a notebook, hidden beneath his mattress, clutched tightly inside a worn-out school bag. She almost left it alone. Almost. But curiosity won. And inside, she found pages and pages written in black ink, obsessive, twisted thoughts that made her blood run cold. "My queen, the only woman I'll ever need. I'll kill my father one day, I will, so that we can be together without interruption. No man will touch her. No man will look at her. If they do, they'll die. She belongs to me. She always has." Her hands trembled as she flipped through page after page, each word stabbing her with guilt, fear, and confusion. What had she done? What had she raised? She quickly stuffed the book back, locked herself in her room, and wept until her eyes stung. And yet, she said nothing. That night at dinner, Jel smiled at her as if nothing had happened. He leaned close to her shoulder and said, "You smell like roses, Mama." And in that moment, despite the horror in her heart, she smiled back, too weak to push him away. But everything changed forever the next night. Adaku was in the kitchen preparing dinner while humming a folk song her own mother used to sing. She felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw Jell standing there, watching her silently. "Jell," she said, forcing a smile. "You startled me." He stepped closer, still not saying a word. His eyes were darker than usual. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her hands and sitting beside him at the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. "Okay, I'm listening." He looked down, then looked up again, this time with fire in his eyes. "I love you, Mama." She chuckled nervously. "Of course you do. I love you too." "No," he interrupted, his voice suddenly stronger. "Not like that. I mean I love you, Mama, like a man loves a woman, like a husband loves his wife. I don't want anyone else. I only want you." Adaku's breath caught in her throat. "What did you just say?" she whispered, rising to her feet. "You heard me," Jell said, standing as well. "You feel it too. I see how you look at me. We were meant to be. You raised me. You loved me. You are mine." Adaku stumbled backward. In shock, her body shaking, her mind racing. "Stop it," she yelled. "This is madness." Before she could grab her phone or call for help, Jell blocked her way. "Don't call him, don't call Daddy. He doesn't understand us, he never did." Just then the front door burst open. Chi stepped inside, and all hell broke loose. Chi had barely stepped into the living room when he heard Adaku's scream echo. From the kitchen, his heart leapt to his throat. He dropped his bag and ran, bursting through the doorway, just as Jell lunged toward his mother. "Don't touch her," Chi roared, grabbing Jell and yanking him away from Adaku with all his strength. Jell thrashed in his father's grip like a wild animal, screaming, "She doesn't need you. She's mine. Mine!" Chi was stunned, frozen for a second as the words sank deep into his gut like poison. This wasn't a rebellious teenager. This was something else, something unnatural, something horrifying. The struggle was brutal, with Jell clawing at his father's shirt like a jealous lover, not a son. It took everything Chi had to pin him down and force him away from Adaku, who stood motionless in the corner, her body shaking, her mind spinning. When Jell finally stopped fighting, breathing like a bull, Chi dragged him into his room and locked the door from the outside. He returned to the kitchen where Adaku was still rooted in place, her eyes distant and filled with disbelief. "Now do you see?" Chi shouted, his voice broken. "This is what I've been warning you about. This obsession is your fault." Adaku said nothing. She slid to the floor, covered her face, and sobbed silently. She had no words, only guilt and regret. The next morning she called her mother Mama Adayes and poured out everything, from the baths to the obsession, from the notebook to the confession. Mama Adayes arrived the very next day, her face grim, and jaw clenched. "I warned you, Adaku. I told you long ago this was wrong. You've crossed sacred lines, my daughter." Chi joined the conversation and suggested therapy, psychological help. "He needs a doctor, not a pastor," he said. "He's sick, deep inside." But Mama Adayes shook her head. "No therapist can handle a child entangled in spiritual matters. This is deeper than the mind. It's a spiritual curse. I know just the man who can help." Despite Chi's protests, Adaku agreed to take Jell to Pastor Nathan, a fiery preacher known across the region for his dramatic exorcisms and bold claims. That weekend, they brought Jell to his ministry. The moment Jell stepped into the sanctuary, Pastor Nathan's eyes flared with theatrical shock. "Ah, this boy, he carries a dark spirit. His soul is chained by a cursed river, Mother. This is not natural love, it is possession." Adaku's eyes widened. "What must we do, Pastor?" Pastor Nathan raised his hands to the heavens. "For a deliverance like this, we must invoke all elements, water, fire, and earth. You must sow a dangerous seed of 500,000 today, or else the spirit will destroy your son." Without blinking, Adaku transferred the money on the spot. The deliverance began immediately. Pastor Nathan shouted and danced around Jell, waving a bottle of anointed oil, chanting in tongues and spraying holy water. The drums beat loudly as the congregation clapped and shouted praises, but Jell stood still, unfazed, his face turned cold. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, grabbed Pastor Nathan's robe and tore it down the middle. "You will not take her from me." Jell roared like a lion. Gasps filled the room. Chaos erupted. Security rushed in, tackled Gel to the floor, and dragged him outside like a mad dog. Adaku watched, horrified, as the crowd parted to let them through. People whispered. Women clutched their children. Her shame had gone public. After that disaster, Adaku and her mother tried several other pastors in neighboring towns. Each time the result was worse. Gel refused prayers, resisted every spiritual effort, and even laughed mockingly during some sessions. At home things grew unbearable. Gel moved his belongings into his mother's room without permission. He refused to sleep in his own bed. Adaku confronted him one night, her voice trembling. "My son, please, this cannot continue. I am your mother." But Gel's eyes were hollow. "If I can't have you, Mama, no one will. Stop taking me to those fake churches. They only make me hate you more." Adaku was stunned. Her hands dropped to her sides, her knees weak. What had she done? That night, she sat alone on her bed, eyes wide open, unable to sleep. She remembered every bath, every moment she should have, set boundaries, every smile she gave when he crossed a line, every time she defended him when Chi tried to correct her. "I've created a monster," she whispered to herself, "a monster with my blood in his veins." The next morning, she discussed boarding school with Chi. Maybe distance would help. Maybe structure and strict routine would shake this madness out of Gel. But she knew Gel wouldn't go without a fight, and she was right. That evening, things escalated to a horrifying level. As Adaku stepped out of the shower, wrapping a towel around her body, Gel was already in her room waiting. His eyes wandered where they shouldn't, and this time he didn't hide it. He stepped forward. "I want to hold you, Mama." Adaku's heart stopped. "No," she said, backing away. "Get out." But Gel didn't stop. His hand reached for her towel. She screamed. The sound echoed through the compound like a death bell. She fled into the hallway, wrapped in fear more than fabric, just as Chi entered through the front door. He saw her, terrified, half-wrapped, shaking, and his blood boiled. "Where is he?" he demanded. Adaku pointed behind her, sobbing. He tried. That was all Chi needed. He picked up his phone and called the police immediately. That night, Gel was taken away in handcuffs. Adaku watched him being driven off with tears in her eyes and a pit in her soul. She didn't know if she was crying for her broken son or for the mother who had broken him. The silence in the house after Gel's arrest was almost too much to bear. Adaku sat curled on the couch, staring into nothingness, her arms wrapped around her knees, like a child trying to protect herself from a storm that had already come and gone. The walls felt colder, emptier, like they too knew something had broken inside that home and could never be fixed again. Chi paced the floor, restless. Though he had done what any father would have, it didn't feel like a victory. How could it? He had just watched his only son get dragged away in cuffs like a criminal because he had to protect his own wife. From their own blood, Adaku hadn't spoken much since the night Gel was taken. Her lips trembled every time she tried. She barely ate. She didn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gel's face, the way he looked at her with those hollow, desperate eyes. The way he fought the officers, not with rage but with heartbreak, as if he was the one being betrayed. Mama Adazi returned to the house and was horrified at the wreckage she found, emotionally, spiritually, physically. "Chi," she said one morning, "how is she?" "She's breathing," he replied, "but I don't know if she's really here anymore." Mama Adazi sat beside her daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You must forgive yourself, but you must also face what you've done. You planted this seed." Adaku finally looked up, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was loving him. I thought I was protecting him." "No," her mother said softly but firmly. "You were feeding your own emptiness. You used that child to fill a void your husband couldn't, and you ignored every warning sign." The words cut deep, but Adaku didn't fight them. She couldn't. Every memory now felt like a mistake carved into stone. A week passed. The police decided to release Gel into the care of the family, but under serious psychological monitoring. He wasn't to attend school. He wasn't to sleep in the main house. And he wasn't allowed near Adaku without supervision, but when he returned, something had changed in him. He was quiet. Too quiet. No more outbursts, no more obsession, just silence. He no longer followed Adaku around. He barely spoke to Chi. He kept to himself in a small room out back and scribbled endlessly in his notebooks. At first they thought it was improvement. Maybe the shock had broken the spell. Maybe distance and isolation were working. But Adaku's heart whispered otherwise. She could feel it. That dark energy hadn't left. It had only changed shape. One morning, as Chi left for work, he turned to Adaku and said, "I've hired a therapist. He'll come twice a week. And I've added more locks to your room. I need to know you're safe." Adaku nodded, too ashamed to speak. Too ashamed to admit that sometimes she still heard footsteps outside her door at night. She still felt watched, haunted, not by spirits, but by guilt. Later that week, she noticed something strange. Her dresses, some of them were missing. A few lipsticks gone too. At first she thought maybe the maid had misplaced them while cleaning, but she didn't confront anyone. Deep down, she already suspected the truth. Then it happened. One rainy evening, while checking on the guest rooms, she opened the door to Jel's room, and she froze. Inside, taped to the wall, were photos of her. Some old, some recent. Some she didn't even know had been taken. Beside the photos were notes scribbled in large bold letters. "I will be patient. She loves me. She just doesn't know it yet. He is the enemy. Soon, it will just be us again." She backed out slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The next day, she begged Chi to send Jel away to a rehabilitation center, a long-term facility anywhere far. But Chi hesitated. "He's still our son," he said. "We can't just throw him away," Adaku snapped. "He's not just our son anymore, Chi. He's dangerous. You weren't the one in that room. You didn't see the way he looked at me. Before the police came." Tears fell from her eyes. "Please, before something worse happens." But before Chi could even respond, a scream came from outside. It was the housemaid. They rushed out to find her holding her face, blood running down her cheek. Jel had hit her with a broken mirror. When Chi demanded why, Jel simply replied, "She touched Mama's dress. No one touches her things but me." It was the final straw. That night, Adaku didn't wait for Chi's approval. She called the psychiatric facility herself. They came the next morning, with 2 plainclothes officers and a doctor. Jel didn't fight. He didn't shout. He didn't even speak. He looked at Adaku one last time and whispered, "I forgive you." Then he left. And for the first time in years, the house exhaled. But the peace came with a heavy price. The house was quieter than ever. The kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, but hollow. A stillness filled every corner, like grief had taken up residence where Jel's presence used to linger. Even the walls seemed to breathe slower, as if they too had been exhausted by the years of emotional war. Adaku walked from room to room in a daze. She had spent so long obsessing over Jel, caring for him, protecting him, suffocating him with unchecked love, that now, with him gone, she didn't know who she was anymore. She wasn't a mother. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't even a woman anymore. She was just there. She tried to carry on with life. She cooked meals no one ate. She cleaned a house no one dirtied. She spoke softly, as if trying not to wake ghosts. Chi, on the other hand, had poured himself into work. He left early, came home late, and barely said a word unless it was necessary. He didn't hate her, but he couldn't forgive her either. Not yet. He slept in the guest room now. Every night, Adaku cried most evenings, quietly, beneath her pillow. Her guilt was no longer sharp. It was dull and constant, like a wound that never stopped bleeding but never killed you either. Mama Adaize stayed for a while, trying to support her daughter. She prayed every morning, fasted in the afternoons, and read scriptures aloud to fill the silence. But even she could see her daughter was drifting further away. "You need healing," Mama Adaize told her one day. "Not just for him, for yourself." Adaku nodded, but healing felt like an impossible destination, some far-off place for better people. A few weeks later, they received the first report from the psychiatric hospital. The therapist said Jel was quiet, too quiet. He spoke to no one unless spoken, so he didn't react to therapy. Didn't ask to come home, but he did draw obsessively. When asked what he was drawing, he only whispered, "My queen." Adaku nearly fainted reading that line. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. She clutched the report to her heart and wept in the corner of the living room for hours. Mama Adaze tried to console her, but the damage was too deep. This wasn't just a scar. It was a wound stitched with shame and sorrow. Chi read the report too, but said nothing. His silence was heavier than words. Weeks turned into months, and slowly something shifted. Adaku stopped checking the windows every time the wind blew. She started eating a little. She even went to church with her mother one Sunday. People stared. Some whispered. Some just looked at her with pity. But she went anyway. After service, one of the elderly women approached her gently. "Daughter," she said, "sometimes the devil enters where love is too blind. But God can still rebuild what's broken, if you let him." Adaku smiled faintly. It was the first time she had smiled in weeks. That night, Chi came home early. For the first time in a long while, he sat in the same room with her, not beside her, but not too far either. They didn't speak at first, but eventually he said, "I got a call today, from the facility." Adaku's heart tightened. "Is he okay?" Chi hesitated. "They say he started talking again. Not a lot, but when he does, he only says one thing." She braced herself. "What?" Chi looked at her, eyes filled with sadness she had never seen before. "He keeps saying, 'Tell Mama I forgive her, tell her she can still come for me.'" Tears rolled down Adaku's cheeks. She whispered, "He doesn't even hate me." "No," Chi said quietly. "He just doesn't know how." There was a long silence. Then Adaku spoke, barely audible. "I failed him, Chi. I failed you. I failed myself." Chi didn't respond immediately. He sat back, stared at the ceiling, and finally said, "I don't need you to punish yourself anymore. I just need you to own what happened. I lost my son too, but I still have you, and I don't know what that's supposed to mean yet, but it has to mean something." Adaku turned her face to him slowly, tears still dripping, her lips trembling. "Do you think he can ever be normal again?" Chi sighed. "I don't know, but I know if there's a chance it starts with both of us, not just sending him away, but showing him that boundaries can exist with love, not against it." For the first time in months, they sat together until midnight, not talking, just existing, sharing silence that didn't feel like a prison. Later that week, they made the hardest decision of their lives, to visit Jel, face him, together, not as saviors, not as the perfect parents, but as two broken people who were ready to try, one more time. The drive to the psychiatric facility was long and quiet. The car cut through the countryside like a boat on still waters, with Chi at the wheel and Adaku beside him, her hands folded tightly on her lap. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was filled with unspoken understanding. They arrived just before noon. The tall grey gates opened slowly, revealing a sterile, quiet compound with the trees planted in perfect lines and benches placed under the shade. It was peaceful. Almost deceptively so. They were led into a counseling room with 2 chairs and a one-way mirror. A therapist entered and gave a soft, professional smile. "Jel has shown signs of emotional withdrawal," she explained gently. "But when he heard you were coming, his mood changed. He asked for fresh clothes, that's something." Adaku's heart pounded as the door creaked open, and then he entered. Taller now, slimmer, still barefoot, still with those heavy eyes, but his face had lost the fire. He looked hollow. He paused when he saw them, his gaze moving from Chi to Adaku. Then his lips curved slightly. Not a smile, not quite, but something close to recognition. Familiarity. "Mama," he said softly. Adaku felt her breath catch in her throat. Her eyes burned. She wanted to run to him, to hold him like she used to, but she didn't. Instead, she stood still and whispered, "Hello, Jel." He sat down. Chi did too. Adaku slowly lowered herself into the seat beside Chi, but kept a respectful distance from her son. "I didn't think you'd come," Jel said, eyes never leaving hers. I had to, Adaku replied. There are things I should have said a long time ago. He looked down, picked at his fingers. You left me. No, Chi interjected. We saved you. And your mother. She's here now because she's finally ready to do what she should have done years ago. Jel looked up again. What's that? Adaku swallowed hard. Her voice shook. To be your mother, not your everything. I crossed a line, Jel. Many lines. I made you believe that love meant possession, that care meant closeness, without rules. I'm sorry, I thought I was protecting you. I was just protecting myself. A long silence followed. Jel's lips parted, and his voice came out low. I thought you loved me the way I loved you. I did love you, Adaku said gently, but not the way you deserved. I made you feel things you weren't supposed to feel. I damaged your innocence. I failed you. And for that, I will always carry the guilt. But I want to change, Jel. I want to heal. I want us to heal. For a long time, Jel said nothing. He looked at Chi, then back at Adaku. Finally, his eyes softened. I hated you, Mama, he said. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. And I hated myself too, Jel continued, because I thought I was broken, that something was wrong with me. No, Jel, Chi said firmly. You're not broken. You're hurt. But you can heal. Another silence settled between them, but this one felt different, lighter. Jel shifted in his chair, exhaled deeply, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded drawing. He handed it to Adaku. She opened it with trembling fingers. It was a sketch of their house, the one he hadn't seen in months. But in the drawing there were only two people sitting in the garden, Jel and his mother. They weren't holding hands, they weren't close. But they were smiling, with space between them. I want that, Jel said quietly. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I want to be normal. Adaku broke into a sob, not out of grief, but out of fragile hope. Chi reached over, gently placed his hand over hers, and nodded. We'll help you get there, he said. Together. They didn't stay long. The therapist advised short, consistent visits instead of overwhelming reunions. When they left, Adaku felt like a new person, not healed, but breaking the shell of denial, finally breathing again. That night at home, she pulled out an old photo album and looked through the pages. There was one picture of Jel at 3 years old, holding onto the hem of her wrapper, looking up at her with all the love in the world. She closed the album, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Next time, I'll get it right." Months passed. Jel remained in the facility, but his progress was steady. He started speaking more, drawing less obsessively, writing journals, accepting boundaries. He was still a long way from normal, but there was a path now, faint but visible. Chi and Adaku attended family counseling sessions. They learned to talk again, to grieve together, to forgive together. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a place where something new could begin. Not perfect, but possible.